welcome to my YouTube video. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to reinforce and cut a steek. So I have a 7-stitch steek, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in this area, and the steek actually extends down into the fabric above and below. The stitch pattern is just there's no change in color, but it's still a steek. I have still allowed 7 stitches for cutting along that edge. So it's easy to see the center stitch right here, but it's not easy to see the center down here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that with a basting thread just so I can see that center column of stitches for when I start the reinforcement. Now there's 3 ways that you can reinforce your steek, and actually there's 4 because you don't have to reinforce it at all. You can just cut it if you want to, but most people feel better thinking that they've reinforced it. One way is to hand baste between, let's use the colored part up here, hand baste between the center stitch and the next stitch over. So you just run a back stitch straight up here, and then on the other side of the center stitch as well you would do a back stitch about 1 stitch wide, back stitch all the way up, and I would do it a second time on each side. So you would have a reinforcement line here and another reinforcement line here, 1 stitch over. You can do the same thing on a sewing machine. So here's your center column. You would run a reinforcement here and here on the sewing machine. I'm going to use the crocheted method. It's my preferred. I think it's prettiest, and I actually kind of like doing it. So I have my crochet hook here and my yarn, which I dropped on the floor. Okay, here it is. I'm just going to use the same yarn that I'm working the pattern in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my crochet hook. You want to use a small yarn. I'm using the same weight that's in my sweater because I used fingering weight yarn. But if you used bulkier yarn, you can still use fingering weight yarn for the crocheted steek. You can even use lace weight. So I made a slip knot and put it on my needle, and I'm going to make 1 chain. And then I'm going to turn my fabric, and I'm going to start down here along the edge and about 2 or 3 stitches from the center stitch, and I'm just going to work a slip stitch. I'm not doing a single crochet. I'm just going to do a slip stitch along the edge just to secure. Let's start over. Just to get it started on the edge of the work. So I'm just going to do 3 right here. Now, we have identified, this was knit so that this is the center stitch. Let me enlarge this so you can see it really good. We have marked the center of the center stitch. I am going to fold it so that I'm going to get, what I'm going to crochet through is the right leg of the center stitch and the left leg of the next column over of stitches. So I'm going to be going through these 2 legs, and then these 2 legs, and these 2 legs, all the way up. So here we go. And once I do the first 2 legs, I'm actually going to remove that basting thread because it's in the way, because now I've identified my column of stitches that I'm going to go through. Let's do 1 more. When we get up to the color work, you'll be able to see it much easier. But if you just fold your work so that that row of stitches is on the top, and you're just going to do a slip stitch, not a single crochet. Single crochet is too bulky. You just want to do a slip stitch straight up the edge. and I'll cut here and come back when I get up to the color work, so you don't have to watch me do every single stitch. So you can see I'm up to where the color work starts now, and as I'm folding it in half, what I'm getting is the one leg of the yellow stitch and one leg of the red stitch. So it's very easy to see. So I'm actually going through the very center of the red column, and we're just going to do that all the way up. And when I get to the solid yellow, I'll continue as I did before the color work. So it's just a crocheted slip stitch, and you can see how I fold the fabric. It's really easy and very quick. So I'm going to continue up this side, and then I'll show you how to do the second side. Okay, so I finished slip stitch crocheting all the way up the side, and I turned the corner at the top as well, so you can see what it looks like. It's that line there, and you can see where it's gone through both the stitches. So we have this line of stitches that are caught between the two sides of the reinforced slip stitch crochet. So now I'm going to start on this side and go up the other edge, and I'll show you how that's done. So we're just going to do the same thing, just go through a few stitches on the end here. And then we'll turn the corner, and what we're going to do this time, actually we're right there, we're going to catch these two legs. So these two legs were caught here. We're going to catch these two legs, this column with this column. And we're going to start right here. And work our way up these legs. Again, I'm folding it, makes it much easier, and it's pretty quick. So again, I'll stop here and catch up with you when I get to the color work. Okay, I'm about at the color work here. And again, we're going through one yellow leg, one red leg. And by keeping it folded, it's very easy. You just want to make sure you're only going through one leg, though, that you're not crossing over to the other leg. Let's see how it's looking. So we can see that the crocheting is making this separation here. It's pulling the center apart. Can you see that? So I'm just going to continue up until I get to the top. I'll be back in a second. Okay, I've worked both sides all the way through. I stopped the second side here because when I cut this, I want you to see what happens to the fabric when there's no reinforcement at all. So you'll see what happens there, okay? So we are ready to cut now. So you pull on the fabric and you can see the stitches in between, and that's where we're going to cut. So we're just going to start right here. Want some nice sharp little scissors. Do you see how nothing's happening? It's not immediately falling apart. And also what happens is that nice crocheted reinforcement, the yellow will actually curl under to the edge, and that reinforced will create the nice tidy edging to the facing. This turns into a facing. You'll see, because I'll go ahead and pick up stitches also so you can see what happens when you pick up the stitches. How it creates a facing. It's kind of fun. Because we're going to get down to the part here where we only have one side reinforced. We're just going to continue cutting right between those two columns of stitches. And you can see you will get a little bit of a rough edge there, but that's not going to come undone. It's not going to just immediately unravel. So I'm going to turn the video off for a second and get my supplies together. We can see how this looks nice and tidy. Both edges look nice and tidy, and I'm going to show you how to pick up stitches along here. Okay, so I've chosen to use the red yarn so that you can see what I'm doing on picking up the stitches here. And you'll first have to figure out what your ratio is, how many stitches you want to pick up per rows. My line here where I want to pick up is in this column right here. So that's the one I'm following, and I'm picking up 7 stitches for 9 rows. That turns out to be my ratio. You have to calculate your own. I have videos on how to calculate ratios for picking up stitches for a button band, and I'll link that up in the video up in the corner there. So you're just going down between the stitches to the back of the work and picking up a loop. In your ratio. And you just continue this along your edge. And what it does, once you start knitting and doing your button band or whatever the trim is you're adding, you can see just by doing that it causes that facing to fold back. It doesn't stick out like this. It won't stick out like this. It can't. So as you pick up stitches, that facing folds back to the back. Let me show you on my sweater. So here is the front of my sweater, one side. This is the yoke and this is the body. And I've picked up the stitches along here, and they're on my needle right now. I'm still working on it. But if you look at the other side, you can see how the facing just automatically folds back and makes this really neat edge along here. Isn't that pretty? So if you like watching my videos and learning from me, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give me a thumbs up down there. Share my videos with your friends. You can join me on Ravelry and Facebook. Look for Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. And I hope you come back and watch some more happy knitting.